Katherine Legge will make her NASCAR Cup Series debut this weekend at Phoenix Raceway with Fast Motorsports, and Larson and William Byron will drive for Spire Motorsports in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports story discusser today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a ton of paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Alex Bowman's 2025 Ally Best Friends scheme that we'll see this weekend at Phoenix. I love this scheme. I always love when Alex Bowman does the Ally Best Friends scheme because usually the scheme looks really awesome. I love the colors on this one. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Phoenix. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Josh Berry's 2025 Get Aero scheme that we'll see for 3 races in 2025. Scheme's okay in my opinion, but I think the most important thing is Amazon's kind of associated with this company, so it's good to see Josh Berry have a new sponsor for this weekend. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Nick Light's 2025 Vans Warped Tour 30th Anniversary scheme that we'll see this weekend at Phoenix. I never thought I'd see the day where Vans Warped Tour would sponsor a NASCAR Xfinity Series car, but this association with one of the agents that works very closely with Nick Lights, I think the scheme looks really awesome, by the way. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Phoenix. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Cole Custer's 2025 Andy's Frozen Custard scheme that we'll see in select races throughout the 2025 season. I absolutely love this scheme. I love the red, I love the blue, I like all the colors in the ice cream cone that's on the front of the car. It looks really awesome. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Christopher Bell's 2025 Riser scheme that we'll see in select races throughout the 2025 season. This is my favorite Riser scheme that I've probably seen since probably the late 2010s. I really like the color of it. I like the black. I like the red contrast. It's a really awesome looking paint scheme. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Kyle Sieg's 2025 TAP scheme that we'll see this weekend at Phoenix. Schemes are right in my opinion. Do like the colors on it, and I think the colors do contrast overall pretty well. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Phoenix. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Cody Ware's 2025 Mighty Fire Breaker scheme that we'll see this weekend at Phoenix. This also will sponsor Ricker Racing in the NHRA event this weekend, I believe, at Gainesville. I think the scheme's okay in my opinion. It's not my favorite looking Ricker Racing scheme, but glad to see the team have a new sponsor. The next main scheme we're taking a look at is Jeremy Clement's 2025 Alliance Driveway scheme that we'll see in 8 races in 2025. I love the yellow. I like the white number. There's some really good colors on this one. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack in select races this year. The next main scheme we're taking a look at is Sheldon Creed's 2025 Pit Boss Grill scheme that will see select races including this weekend at Phoenix. I love the look of this car. The colors look really good on this one. The fire look, the orange, the brown, all that stuff. I think the scheme looks really awesome. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ty Dillon's 2025 Hybrid Light scheme that we'll see this weekend at Phoenix. Scheme's okay in my opinion. It's awesome to see though Ty Dillon does have a new sponsor for Phoenix. We'll see how he can do in this car. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Todd Gilliland's 2025 Frontline Enterprises scheme that we'll see this weekend at Phoenix. Looks very similar to the ones he's had in the past when he drove the 38 car. There's not much differences to it, but it's not a bad overall looking paint scheme. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Austin Cinders' 2025 Dale Earnhardt throwback scheme to Dale when Dale Earnhardt drove the number 2 back in 1980 for Rod Osterlund. That'll be run at Darlington. I love this one. There's not been a lot of throwbacks revealed, but this is one of the better ones I've seen so far in recent years. The colors really match perfectly. Not the biggest fan of the Freightliner on the front of the car, but sponsors really dictate when it comes to that stuff. I think this looks really good, and I can't wait for the remainder of the throwbacks to be revealed for a Darlington throwback race next month. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ross Chastain's 2025 Kubota Orange Days scheme that we'll see this weekend at Phoenix. I'm going to be honest, it's probably one of my least favorite Trackhouse paint schemes I've seen so far. They're usually on the mark when it comes to their schemes, but I'm not the biggest fan of this one. I think the white, the black, and the orange really don't contrast that well together. I like the old school Kubota scheme, but this one doesn't really work out in their favor in my opinion. I think it's too much going on with this one. Not my favorite Ross Chastain paint scheme. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Road Ranger. Now, earlier this week, Road Ranger put out a very interesting thank you message to Ty Majeski in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series after sponsoring him over the course of the last 3 years. We already know the Road Ranger will not be sponsoring ThorSport Racing throughout the 2025 season, as Road Ranger is very closely associated with Ford, and they're moving up to the Xfinity Series sponsor the Haas Factory team for 12 more races in 2025 with Sheldon Creed. Road Ranger, like I mentioned, really closely aligned with Ford. There's been rumors and speculation that Thorsport Racing could be switching away from Ford and going to Dodge as early as 2025. With Road Ranger making this move and writing a really nice thank you message they put up, I think there's a really good chance and possibly we're going to see this happen. That Road Ranger going over there will indicate that Thorsport Racing more than likely is switching over to another manufacturer in 2025. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Zac Brown Band. As it was announced on Monday late afternoon that Zac Brown Band will be performing at the Chicago Street Course for the Saturday headliner. They're the only band that has been announced, I believe, currently at the moment to perform at the Chicago Street Course. Now, if you know anything about NASCAR history, you know that when NASCAR isn't putting as many of those big acts like they did last year with the Chainsmokers and Keith Urban, and they're getting an act that while they're still a little bit popular, they're not as popular as they were about 10 or 15 years ago. That's a massive indication that the future of Zac Brown and the future of the Chicago Street Course as a whole is very uncertain, because a lot of people are expecting that in 2026 that we're not going to be back at the Chicago Street Course, and only having one act confirmed currently at the moment indicates to me they're likely moving on, as it's heavily rumored that we probably will be going to San Diego in 2026 as NASCAR is trying to find that West Coast audience for the 2026 year. I think this is a massive indication that that is likely going to end up happening. Pretty cool though, Zac Brown Band will get the chance and opportunity to perform at the Chicago Street Course weekend. We'll have to wait and see what other acts do get announced for the Chicago Street Course weekend. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Liquid Death. As it was reported by Adam Stern early Monday afternoon that Liquid Death has officially selected its winners to its fan sweepstakes that it's been doing with the fan contest. And one person you probably noticed is Tyler Villanueva, aka fellow NASCAR YouTuber Vanilla Wafer. It's really awesome to see someone like Vanilla Wafer, who I think puts out some really fun and really good content and really informative content as well. I think it's pretty cool that Liquid Death is working with him, and I think they're going to be doing some really cool stuff with him throughout the 2025 year. And to get to work with one of the up-and-coming inspiring NASCAR YouTubers, I think that's really cool to see. Congratulations to him on getting to work with Liquid Death going forward, and I think there's some really good opportunities for him going forward into the future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Dawson Cram. As it was announced Monday evening that Dawson Cram will drive the 74 car for Mike Harmon Racing this weekend at Phoenix Raceway. This, I believe, will be the first start for Dawson Cram in the 2025 season, as Dawson does not have a full-time ride currently at the moment for this year. He's going to a familiar team, which he's driven for in the past and is out-qualified in those cars in the past as well. Yeah, I do believe Mike Harmon Racing, though, won't have to worry about making the races. Obviously, there's only 37 cars that are showing up to the NASCAR Xfinity Series race this weekend. So the ultimate goal for this team, for Dawson, is to try to get this team as many owners' points as possible so they can be able to make the show going forward and have the pace and speed to go ahead and make the show. It's a great opportunity for Dawson, though. I think Dawson has the potential to qualify inside the top 30. We'll have to see if the equipment can be reliable throughout the whole entire event, but I think he does have a very good chance and opportunity to run very, very well with the Mike Harmon Racing organization for sure this weekend at Phoenix Raceway. We'll see how this team and organization ends up doing. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Andretti Global. As it was reported by Bob Pockrass earlier this week, that Andretti Global is officially moving its operations into a 240,000 square foot facility later this year. I believe this is the former building where the Indianapolis Star, one of the biggest newspaper publications, has been housing for a very, very long time. Now, I believe the Arrow McLaren will be moving their shop over to the old Andretti Global stable starting in 2025. They purchased that for this year. Obviously, Andretti Global, of course, they're associated with all the brandings. They're associated with NASCAR a little bit. They're associated with their IndyCar program. And Andretti still has really big fingers on the Cadillac brand that is going to be running in Formula One in 2026. It's unknown at this time what drivers are going to be part of that Cadillac brand for the 2026 year, but I think a lot of the Formula One stuff is going to be working very, very closely with Andretti, and I think you're going to see, while Michael Andretti is no longer involved with the team very closely, Mario Andretti is working with them, and Dan Towers, who is the owner of a lot of the groups over there with Gamebridge, among other companies associated with, has his hands really in it and looking to try to grow that is a massive brand. And I think seeing Andretti Global move into this new shop, they're going to be able to have some great opportunities, and I think it could lead to some really fun stuff going forward for the team into the not-so-distant future, but really awesome to see that Andretti Global is moving into a new shop for the 2025 year. It should be done relatively soon. Everything should be definitely set up and good to go for the not-so-distant future. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Treyten Lapcevich. As it was announced early this morning that Treyten Lapcevich will be joining Venturini Motorsports on a part-time basis in 2025, driving a number 15 car for the organization. Treyten Lapcevich has won multiple races in the Cars Tour and I believe has made a couple starts in the ARCA Series and also, as I believe, won championships in the NASCAR Canada Series in the past as well. Treyten, in my opinion, is one of the best talents out there that did not have a contract signed in motorsports at all for the 2025 year. And he's getting a chance and opportunity with Venturini Motorsports. While Venturini Motorsports is not as strong as they were a few years ago when they won the championship with Jesse Love back, I believe, in 2023, they're still a very solid organization that did win races last year with Gus Dean and also is very competitive with other drivers like Jake Finch, who picked up a win at Talladega in the number 20 car. I can see Treyten Lapcevich having a chance to win this weekend at Phoenix because he's going to be driving the number 15 car this weekend at Phoenix Raceway. I don't think they revealed the rest schedule for Treyten, but I would love to see him run the rest of the year with the team and the program because I think that Treyten Lapcevich deserves a chance and opportunity. He's kind of like Brett Moffitt a little bit in a way because Brett Moffitt's a driver who I also think deserves to be full-time racing in a series currently at the moment. But I think for Treyten, this is a really great opportunity for him, and I think he's got a fantastic opportunity to compete for the win. He's going to be going up against Brendan Butterbean Queen, Isabel Robusto, Corey Day this weekend. I believe that Jake Bowman's going to be driving the number 19 car for Bill McAnally's team this weekend. And you've got some other big names like Brent Cruz, who I believe are also driving this weekend at Phoenix. But there's a lot of big names that are going to run. Glad to see that Treyten Lapcevich will get the chance and opportunity to work at Venturini Motorsports in 2025. And now we're going ahead to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about some updates toward the Indianapolis 500. As it was reported by Nathan Brown from the Indianapolis Star, there's been some very interesting updates in regards to the potential interest for this year's upcoming Indianapolis 500. And there's two names that are being talked about currently at the moment that might have rights for this year's Indy 500. The first one is two-time Indianapolis 500 winner who won the 2017 and 2020 Indianapolis 500s. We are talking about Takuma Sato, who is heavily rumored to be driving a fourth Rahal Lunderman Lanigan racing car and be teammates with Louis Foster in the 45. The 30 car that's been driven by Devlin DeFrancesco and Graham Rahal, who's really running the operations over there at this point and doing a lot of stuff over there currently at the moment. I think Takuma Sato and a Rahal car, that is going to make those cars a lot faster because every team that Takuma Sato ends up going to, that organization shows a lot of improvement and a ton of potential. And I think Takuma is going to be there to really help grow that program really closely in this year's Indianapolis 500. Now, there's been some talk about maybe Jimmy Johnson opening up a fourth Chip Ganassi racing car with Tom Brady being an owner of that car. That is not going to be the case, unfortunately. We're not going to see Sebastian Bourdais drive a car, despite the fact that we're having rumors about him making a start there. The other driver is Katherine Legge. It sounds like Katherine Legge is working on a deal with Honda currently at the moment. It's unknown if Dale Coyne Racing is going to run a third car on a part-time basis this year. We're going to talk about Katherine Legge in a pretty big way here near the end of this episode with her making her NASCAR Cup Series debut. But overall, it sounds like Takuma Sato and Katherine Legge are going to be running in this year's Indy 500 in 2025. Which I do think that both do have a solid chance and opportunity to be very, very competitive with whatever rides they end up making. But if you're Rahal, you better hope you get to Takuma because your cars have really struggled to qualify for the Indianapolis 500 in years past. We've seen them struggle. We'll see what they can do later this year. And now we're going ahead to on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about SMT data. Is this something that was brought up during this most recent Action Detrimental? That apparently there's been some changes in regards to SMT data. According to Jeff Gluck, who does a lot of work for The Athletic, he says that NASCAR is now doing the data and not SMT. SMT, I believe, stands for Sports Media Television. I believe that's where the data comes from, if I'm not mistaken. And they've been using SMT since, I believe, the mid-1980s all the way up to the early 1990s. And early in the time we've seen SMT, it wasn't used very, very closely. However, we have seen, especially with the next-gen car, and drivers being able to view that SMT data from other drivers with the updates of that in recent years, we've seen the racing product and the racing quality definitely suffer for sure. And I think NASCAR may be having a little bit more control over the SMT data and the NASCAR data as well. That might give the opportunity for more separation going forward, because while I think having a lot more competitive cars on the track is not a bad thing in my opinion, I think you need that separation in the field a little bit to create that much better racing. I think one of the things that I've been kind of against is SMT data, and I don't think that every team should be allowed to look at everybody's data. If you want to look at your own data, that's fine, or your teammates' data, I think that's okay because you're working with the same team, but I don't believe that we should be seeing so many of the teams be able to use different data to try to gain such a big advantage on another driver. Kind of figure out what Kevin Harvick did back in 2018 to be so successful at Phoenix and Atlanta as well, which is one of the reasons why Kevin Harvick didn't win as much near the end of his career at Phoenix Raceway. But overall, I do believe that we're going to see some changes here and some positive changes with SMT data no longer really being in control of that overall. I think it's a good change to get rid of SMT data making decisions and making the changes that they need, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Brad Keselowski. Now, I was not able to talk about the situation that happened during the NASCAR Cup Series race at Circuit of the Americas, but after the NASCAR Cup Series race had concluded at Circuit Americas, Brad Keselowski had apparently been put on a stretcher because what had happened was his cool suit had unfortunately failed during the race. And with the temperatures being a little bit warmer, even though they weren't super high, they were still pretty warm, especially for Texas standards in early March. Brad Keselowski's cool suit had unfortunately failed, and especially with how much of it being like a short track and how tight the track can be, it definitely can really take a toll on people, unfortunately. First thing I want to do is say is Brad Keselowski was okay and basically gave a thumbs up that he was good to go and was released from the infield care center about an hour after this situation happened. First of all, thank God Brad Keselowski was okay after this situation. When you see situations like this, it is very scary. So the most important thing for Brad is that thank God he's okay. He is good to go, and I believe he's been medically cleared to run this weekend at Phoenix, which I think is a positive thing out of this situation. Cool sealing suits are something that really needs to be had, in my opinion, and I think that every driver should have a cool suit in situations like this. But when the cool suit fails, it is not the most fun thing to have. So I'm glad to see Brad okay after this situation, because seeing him basically have what happened to him is absolutely scary. Thank God Brad Keselowski was okay after what happened there, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Denny Hamlin. Now, during the NASCAR Cup Series race, we had a really good tire strategy battle going on between Kyle Busch, William Byron, and Christopher Bell. And Christopher Bell had the freshest tires of the top three and was running down William Byron and Kyle Busch. And it looked like we were going to see a really good battle between these three drivers going for the victory. However, there was a caution to happen with about 15 laps to go in this race when Denny Hamlin would end up spinning out going into, I believe, turn 6A and would end up crashing into Austin Dillon. Now, Denny Hamlin spoke about the incident on his podcast, and he actually apologized to Austin Dillon and texted him after the race had concluded. And he also defended himself by saying, the one thing I do not want to do, because there was a lot of accusations about Denny Hamlin basically trying to help out his teammate Christopher Bell win the race. Denny Hamlin basically said, the worst thing I want to see is my teammate win, because that's one less race that I'm able to win. And he said he would definitely happy to see Bell in victory lane after. Well, he doesn't want to see a teammate win the race as a whole. So in the situation here for Denny Hamlin, you can actually see on the onboard and take a look. Denny Hamlin got really wide going into the corner. Denny Hamlin has not been the best road course racer in the next-gen era, and Denny Hamlin's made a lot of mistakes in the next-gen era as well, especially over the course of the last couple of years. He's qualified well for a lot of these races like he did this past week in COTA, but has not been able to control his car, and he makes a lot of mistakes, it seems like, on a very consistent basis. I think Denny Hamlin, his goal is to try to get the best finish that he can. And while he was trying to compete for a top 20, which he was trying to get as many positions as he can to get up to the front, Hamlin was really struggling throughout the race, was running outside of top 20 a lot of the event, and just didn't have the consistent speed and pace to keep up. And we all got to remember, Denny Hamlin and Austin Dillon are really good friends off the racetrack. I know that Denny was not very happy with Austin Dillon after what happened last year at Richmond, but I don't think Denny Hamlin was getting payback like some of us were suggesting. I think Denny Hamlin just made a big mistake and overcooked the corner, and Denny Hamlin did bring that caution, which I think did cost Kyle in a sense, but at the same time, Denny Hamlin's intentions were never to screw Kyle. Kyle. And I think Kyle was going to have a tough time holding off Christopher Bell anyways on the long run. So I personally don't think that Denny Hamlin tried to screw him over. I think it's just a big mistake to happen on his part, and I don't think it was intentional, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the St. Petersburg TV ratings for IndyCar. As it was reported by Adam Stern earlier today, that Fox got 1.417 million viewers for Sunday's IndyCar opener at St. Petersburg. That is up 45% from 975,000 viewers from 2024 on the main NBC network. That is a very solid number for the opener of IndyCar. I believe it is the most watched season opener for IndyCar since, I believe, 2022 or 2021. The race, of course, was on NBC because a lot of the NASCAR fans were tuning into the opener at St. Pete a couple years ago and then transitioning over, I believe, the Circuit Americas, but I can't exactly remember. Now, this is a really good start because obviously I think some of the IndyCar fans and some people that do work in the IndyCar industry were expecting the ratings to be in like the 1.5 to 1.6 million range. I think having 1.417, that's definitely something that they can definitely build upon. I thought the broadcast itself for Fox, at least on the IndyCar side of things, I definitely thought it was really, really good. The NASCAR broadcast, we're going to talk about that in just a little bit because that was a much different story. But I do think the ratings for IndyCar are starting off on a really strong note. Now they need to continue promoting the sport going forward. They need to promote the Thermal Club. They need to promote Barber. Because the sooner they can promote some of these tracks and other races on the schedule, which it seems like they're doing a decent job on that front, I think that can help IndyCar. I think those ads on the Super Bowl for Alex Palou, Pat Ward, and Joseph Newgarden, three of the biggest stars in IndyCar, I think that really helped IndyCar grow in a big way to start off. To have over 500,000 people tune in more compared to the previous time, I think that is absolutely a huge deal for IndyCar as a whole and a pretty big win. I know they wanted a bigger number on the IndyCar side of things, but they can definitely build upon it. I thought the broadcast generally had a lot of good moments for sure, and I think IndyCar did a really good job to deliver a solid broadcast as a whole. And we also saw a driver who's generally popular in the IndyCar sphere be able to pick up the win, that being Alex Palou this past weekend at St. Petersburg. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Circuit America TV ratings for the NASCAR Cup Series from this past weekend. And honestly, they're pretty solid. As it was reported by Adam Stern earlier today, that Fox got a 2.15 rating and 4.132 million viewers for Sunday's race at Circuit of the Americas. That is up from 3.310 from 2024, but that race took place in late March. Now keep this in mind, this race took place basically at the beginning of March, and we saw ratings actually not be as high as I believe the third race of the year in 2024 had around 4.3 to 4.4 million viewers. So it's down from Las Vegas in 2024, but we got to remember a couple things. Number one, road course races generally when it comes to the TV product, when it comes to people tuning in, they generally do not basically do as well as they like on an oval. While Austin is a growing market, Las Vegas is also a bigger market than Austin, Texas is. So to see still over 4 million people, which is one of the most well-tuned in races we've seen in the next-gen era, I think that is absolutely a pretty massive deal. And NASCAR is off to a pretty decent start. Now that being said, over the course of the next couple of weeks, we are probably going to see quite a few bits of rating drops just because a lot of the races going forward are going to be on FS1. The only race that is going to be on Fox going forward for main Fox is going to be at Talladega, which of course is Super Speedway, and we're going to see a lot of promotion for that race most likely. But I think also the broadcast not being as good probably affect a little bit more. I do think that IndyCar did help a little bit for sure because I do think some of those IndyCar fans were able to go ahead and tune in to some really good racing at COTA. I thought the racing itself generally was really fun and positive. We're going to talk about that great battle here in just a short little bit at the end of the day. But I do think that the Cup ratings are really solid, and I think they've been off to a good start so far in 2025. We're going to have to wait and see if they can continue on. I think you're going to see some decent ratings for Vegas, but I think you're going to see some rating drops, of course, from 2024 when the race was obviously on main Fox. Of course, going into this year, it's going to be on FS1 when we get to Phoenix, when we get to Vegas. All those races going forward are going to lose some of those big ratings because they're not in those big markets, and Phoenix generally is not a track that puts on the best product as a whole when it comes to racing and also broadcast as well. Overall, I think it is a very solid rating, though, for the first road course race in 2025. We'll see if that momentum can definitely continue throughout the 2025 NASCAR Cup season, even though I'm not really expecting it, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Fox Sports once again. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race this past weekend at Circuit Americas, you saw some pretty lackadaisical coverage for the NASCAR Cup Series race at Circuit of the Americas. There were a lot of fundamental flaws and a lot of fundamental issues from this past weekend's race at Circuit of the Americas. It all started in the middle portion of the race. Now, I think that Mike Joy, Kevin Harvick, and Clint Bowyer honestly did not do a bad job this weekend. But in stage number 2, near the end of stage number 2, you have a long green flag run going on. Kyle Busch and Shane Van Gisbergen, the two drivers who have dominated the majority of the first half of the event, they're both battling to decide who's going to be the leader at the start of stage number 3. But then all of a sudden, they cut the Kyle Larson's tire in turn number 7 and turn number 8. They do a side-by-side. And then they cut the Ryan Preece, who has no competition near him. When you've got the battle to decide who's going to be leading at the start of stage number 3, you probably should focus more on that battle instead of focus on who's leading the race at the time, who's going to be a non-factor and not going to have a chance to go to victory lane, and who's going to cause Kyle Larson to spin later in the event. And then, of course, the end of this race. Oh my goodness. The end of this race, it was abysmal. Final laps, we have a great battle going on between Kyle Busch, Christopher Bell, William Byron, and Tyler Reddick. What does Fox do? With 6 laps to go in this race, Christopher Bell is on the outside of Kyle Busch. And they show the grandstands, and you cannot see what's going on. They cut for about 15 to 20 seconds of dead air. You can hear Clint Bowyer getting really frustrated on the broadcast, and they cut off the mics. And then they show a really bad in-car camera where you see Bell getting passed by Kyle Busch once again. Fox is so far behind on the NASCAR side, it's unbelievable. I've been saying this for a while at this point, and I'm going to say it again. NASCAR Productions needs to take full control of the broadcast. We've had the same guy directing the Fox broadcast now for a quarter of a century. He needs to step down, and Fox needs to hand it over the reins over to the NASCAR production side of things, because NASCAR Productions, they're producing the CW coverage currently at the moment, and that coverage is so much better compared to what we're seeing on Fox. And the CW just joined a few weeks ago. I know there's some fundamental issues with the CW that need to be discussed going forward, but I think that there's a lot of things that Fox really needs to do. One, get Jamie Little being out as a play-by-play for the Truck Series. That's one thing that needs to happen. Number 2, they need to do a better job covering and stop showing kids and all that stuff throughout these events. Focus on the racing product. You guys used to be good years ago. 3, stop bringing costs into the broadcast. I can hear people coughing and all that stuff on the broadcast, and there's just no chemistry, no energy a lot of times that you get in the booth like you're seeing with the CW, where the energy is really fantastic and really, really good. Fox, they need to clean it up. There's a lot of things they need to change, and I think the broadcasts right now are absolutely lackadaisical. They're absolutely terrible, and they are not fun to watch currently at the moment, and I think it's really hurting the growth of NASCAR as one of the biggest things that's really affecting and stunning the growth overall, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Christopher Bell. Now, Christopher Bell was on Sirius XM NASCAR Radio earlier today and spoke about the fantastic and clean battle between him, Kyle Busch, Tyler Reddick, and William Byron for the win. And we saw a lot of drivers actually praise the drivers up front for that really awesome battle. We saw drivers like Chase Elliott praise the incredible and really clean battle at the end. And we also saw Kyle Busch praise Christopher Bell and actually go up to victory lane to congratulate Christopher Bell on beating him at the end of the day. But it continued on earlier this week as, like I mentioned, Christopher Bell was on Sirius XM NASCAR Radio on Tuesday, and he basically says that he wants to change the narrative in regards to how the racing product goes. And he doesn't want to see all these demolition derbies going forward, but he wants to see more clean finishes like we saw this past week in a COTA. Instead of turning into a bang barn every single week, he wants to see really fantastic racing that doesn't have to involve contact every single time. Now, I personally think a little bit of contact and some contact is not a bad thing in the sport. That's what NASCAR stock car racing's been for a very long time, going back to the 1980s, the 70s, and also the 1990s as well. But I 100% agree with Christopher Bell on one thing. We have seen a lot of finishes in the NASCAR Cup Series, especially in the next-gen era, where we have seen drivers pull out desperate moves and demolition moves that have taken drivers out of contention for really great runs and great finishes. I go back to last year at Richmond. We saw Austin Dillon clean out not only Joey Logano, but Denny Hamlin at the end of the race. And that is just not right. And that's not the way I want to see good finishes, because people like myself get really, really frustrated, because Austin Dillon had a really strong car in that race. He did not need to do what he did there in that event, and he cost himself a chance of making the playoffs because he made that really dirty and bad move. I want to see more clean finishes like we saw with COTA, because outside of some officiating issues, we're not talking about a really controversial finish. We're talking about one of the best road course battles we have probably seen ever, and maybe one of the best road course races in the next-gen era. I personally think Circuit Americas does need to come back in 2025, 26, I should say, just because the racing this year was really awesome. But we saw an all-time classic battle at the end, and three of the cleanest drivers in the field, Tyler Reddick, William Byron, and Chris Bell, all battling very, very cleanly and not taking each other out, unlike Ross Chastain, who wanted to go bowling on lap number 1, had the funny enough move out of the way so he didn't get taken out by Chase Elliott, who actually rallied all the way up to finishing in 4th, which is an incredible comeback. But we've seen a lot of these drivers that are aggressive take other drivers out of contention and be frowned upon. So I think cleaning up some of those antics and some of those mistakes is really, really good. And I think that the overall aggressive driving, I think some aggression, like I said, is really, really good. But I think we should be not having as much aggression on the track. And I want to see more clean racing going forward. And I think that they need to try to change that narrative on that front, because the sooner we can have some of those cleaner finishes and the cleaner racing, the better I think it's going to be for everybody. I think it was a fantastic race at Circuit Americas. I'm tired of seeing just wreck fest every single time. I think what we saw at Circuit Americas was awesome. And it's a finish that I think many of us are going to remember for many years and probably for a long time. It's one of the best battles we've seen on road courses, very similar to the Shane Van Gisbergen and Kyle Larson battle we saw in the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Circuit Americas at the Chicago Street Course last year. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Connor Zilisch. Now, Connor Zilisch, of course, made his NASCAR Cup Series debut this past weekend at Circuit Americas and qualified inside of the top 15. But he got caught up in the incident on lap number 1 when his teammate, like I already mentioned, decided to go bowling and get into Chase Elliott. This caused a massive stack up where Ty Gibbs got into Denny Hamlin, and basically Connor Zilisch had nowhere to go and had a right front tire down. But Connor Zilisch is making his way back up to the front and had one of the fastest cars in the field, and honestly could have had a chance and opportunity to maybe win in his debut. However, he got caught up in an incident with Daniel Suarez near the end of the race, or the middle portion of the race, and because he got caught up in that crash with Suarez, who was spinning going to the final corner of the event, he, unfortunately, his day would end up coming to an end. And now there's a lot of questions about Connor Zilisch's future in the NASCAR Cup Series, and there's been people wondering if Connor Zilisch will ever make any more NASCAR Cup Series starts in 2025. Well, Justin Marks was on Sirius XM NASCAR radio earlier today, and he basically said that Connor Zilisch could potentially make some more NASCAR Cup starts in 2025, as of course Red Bull is wanting him to be in the NASCAR Cup Series. Red Bull is heavily closely aligned with Connor Zilisch, as Connor Zilisch is part of the Red Bull Racing family currently at the moment. They've had some of the Formula One drivers, so some of the teams like Liam Lawson, of course Yuki Tsunoda, do some stuff with him, and Shane Van Gisbergen, and of course Red Bull did sponsor him in his NASCAR Cup debut, the first time we've seen Red Bull on a car as a full sponsor since 2011 when they sponsored Casey Kane at the end of the season. I think that Connor Zilisch definitely should do it. But then he did continue on that being Justin Marks by saying that the full focus should be on the NASCAR Xfinity Series, and we don't want to throw him to the wolves very, very quickly. We want him to take his time. It does sound like very likely, though, at this point that Connor Zilisch is going to make more NASCAR Cup Series starts at some point in 2025. And I am very, very excited about that. I think Connor Zilisch is one of the best young raw talents we have seen come up in the ranks in recent years. He, of course, has won the Sebring 12 Hours in LMP2, the Rolex 24 in LMP2. He won on his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut. He won the Xfinity Series race at Circuit Americas this past weekend. And he's been very fast on the road course, but also has shown a lot of potential on the ovals as well. And I think Connor Zilisch is a driver that, as he does get a lot older, he actually shares some characteristics with Kyle Busch, as he did basically get crashed out and finish last in the race, and Kyle Busch did have that same issue where he finished outside of the top 40 in the event and just struggled at Kansas Speedway in 2004. So they have, actually Vegas, I should say, so they have something in common. Both are really great drivers. I think Zilisch will make starts throughout the year. I would not be surprised if he runs the Chicago Street Course, considering I do think the Trackhouse could be fielding another car for that event. But then you kind of start thinking about the future for Connor, right? And what is the potential possibility for Connor going into next year? I think it's very likely that Connor Zilisch is going to replace Daniel Suarez in 2026. As much as I do like Daniel Suarez, Suarez has been struggling immensely with Trackhouse Racing. I think the writing's on the wall. You've got Pitbull, who is no longer associated with the team going forward. And then, of course, Suarez just has not had the best start to 2025. He's had back-to-back weeks where he's crashed out at 2 tracks where he should definitely be running a lot more consistent and running a lot quicker and faster. He's just not doing that currently at the moment and is making a ton of errors and a ton of mistakes on the racetrack. I think Zilisch, who I think is going to get a lot better. I know some are going to say that we shouldn't rush him up. I don't completely disagree with that, but I think there's very few drivers around that age. He will be 19 in 2026. He won't be 18 years old, and he will get a lot better as a driver because he is going to make some of those mistakes as an 18-year-old driver, but I think he's a really talented race car driver, can do a very, very good job, and I think you will see him make some more starts in the NASCAR Cup Series at some point in 2025, and I think there's a very realistic chance and a very strong possibility that we are going to eventually see Connor Zilisch full-time in the NASCAR Cup Series. I think it's going to be with Trackhouse Racing. And one of my theories is that Dale Jr. Motorsports are going to be involved in some big way or shape or form with the program potentially in the 2026 season. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson and William Byron. As it was announced earlier today that Kyle Larson and William Byron will be driving a 07 truck for Spire Motorsports in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series in 2025. William Byron is going to drive the 07 truck at Martinsville Speedway, while Kyle Larson will drive the truck at Homestead and Bristol Motor Speedway. The 07 truck is the all-star truck. We have seen Michael McDowell drive the truck in the first 2 Truck Series races of 2025. We, of course, saw him run at Daytona and Atlanta Motor Speedway, and we're expecting that truck to run in other races outside of the 3 upcoming races for William Byron and Kyle Larson. There's a potential possibility that Carson Osbar might make more starts in that truck this year. Also, Justin Haley is expected to make more starts also in the Craftsman Truck Series, and I think Kyle Busch is also going to run one truck start in that 07 truck in 2025. These guys, of course, are 2 of the best drivers in NASCAR Cup competition. William Byron, of course, an Xfinity Series champion, and has already won a race this year in 2025 as he went back-to-back in the Daytona 500. While Kyle Larson is arguably the most talented driver in the NASCAR Cup Series currently at the moment, and while he has not won a race so far this year, he's won 29 career NASCAR Cup Series events. Let's begin by talking about William Byron at Martinsville. William Byron has historically been very, very good at Martinsville, as if I'm not mistaken, William Byron was the first driver to win for their Truck Series program back in 2022 and got a win there in the number 7 truck where he absolutely dominated the event. So he is going to be one of the favorites going into that weekend. Now, I think there's some really good competition. Guys, of course, in the series like a Chandler Smith, a Lane Riggs, who I think are going to be very strong during that weekend. But going into that weekend in Martinsville, William Byron is absolutely going to be a favorite to win that weekend in Martinsville. But the big storyline here is the 2 races that Kyle Larson is going to be running. He is going to be going for the Triple Crown, not just in the NASCAR Cup, Xfinity, but trucks as well, as he's going to be doing it at Homestead in Bristol. Of course, he's going to drive the 07 truck at Homestead in Bristol. He's going to drive the number 17 car at Homestead in Bristol. And then, of course, going to drive the 5 car for Hendrick Motorsports at both those tracks as well. Those are 2 of his best tracks in NASCAR competition. He's won a Truck Series race there, I believe, back in 2014. He's won an Xfinity race or 2 Xfinity Series races at Homestead Miami Speedway back in 2015. And, of course, Kyle Larson has won a Cup race at Homestead Miami Speedway back in 2022. Kyle Larson is absolutely going to be the favorite in the truck race there at Homestead. He is going to be really strong that week, and I think that number 07 truck will have some really strong pace and some very good speed in that event. There's going to be some good competition, like I said, between guys like Chandler Smith, Lane Riggs, other people in the field like a Raj Kruf who's been pretty good there. Grant Finger is the defending winner Homestead, but I think Larson absolutely is going to be the favorite there. And then the other track is Bristol. Do I have to remind you, Kyle Larson dominated Bristol the last time we were there in the NASCAR Cup Series, as Kyle Larson led over 470 laps in the event. The most we've seen from a driver leading at Bristol since Cale Yarborough back, I believe, in 1977, where I'm pretty sure he almost led every single lap in the event. Kyle Larson is one of the best drivers at Bristol, one of the few tracks where he's led 1,000 laps in NASCAR Cup competition, and I think Larson will be a major factor to win at Bristol as well. There is going to be good competition competition, like I already mentioned and said. We're going to see some great speed from McAnally Hilgeman, but I think Larson could have the opportunity to do something that I don't think he's ever done before. I don't believe he's ever won all 3 races in the same weekend. Of course, Kyle Busch has been extremely successful in doing that, where he's been able to win in all 3 series on the same weekend. He's done that like 24, 25 times in his NASCAR career at this point. But I think Larson, with how good he's been at these respective tracks, I think he's got a good chance and opportunity to go to victory lane. And the most important thing, the truck drives very similar to the NASCAR Cup car. We've seen some of the truck drivers transition to Cup, like Corey Heim is going to make some starts later this year, like at Kansas in a couple months from now. And also Carson Osbar jumped all the way straight from the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series all the way up to the Cup Series for the last year. And I think that you've got a really strong duo of drivers here who I think have an opportunity to win. I think the number 07 truck will pick up at least one win with these 2 drivers, I should say. And I think Larson will be a major factor to go to victory lane. We're going to have to wait and see which drivers end up driving this truck in other races throughout the 2025 year, because I do think this truck is going to drive another 8 or 10 races at least outside of these 3. But I think that Larson and William Byron could win all these races, and I think that there's a very good chance and possibility that 2 of the 3 wins are definitely going to come for both these guys. Excited to see what Kyle Larson can do, and also see what William Byron can do in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. Last time Larson raced into trucks was in North Wilkesboro in 2023, and was also able to pick up his 2nd career NASCAR Craftsman Truck win at the track a couple years ago. We'll get to see what he can do later this week, or later in the next couple weeks. And now we're going to head on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're talking about Katherine Legge. Now, I did a video covering this on this channel earlier this week, but it was announced on Monday morning that Katherine Legge will make her NASCAR Cup Series debut this weekend at Phoenix Raceway, driving a number 78 car for Live Fast Motorsports, with Drop Life sponsoring the organization. Now, this is a race that was not originally on Live Fast Motorsports' schedule, as Live Fast Motorsports had only been planning to run all the super speedway races in 2025. She is going to be the first female driver to compete in the NASCAR Cup Series since when Danica Patrick drove the number 7 car, I believe, for Tommy Baldwin Racing back in 2018 at Premium Motorsports, with Tony Eury Jr. as her crew chief, where she unfortunately got caught up in a big wreck just past the halfway point of the race, and her day came to an end very, very early. Katherine Legge, for those who don't know, is one of the most successful female drivers in recent motorsports history over the course of the last 3 decades. She has won races in IMSA. She's been very competitive in IndyCar. She has made the last couple Indianapolis 500s and has been the fastest female qualifier in Indy 500 history. She's also competed recently in stock car competition, as she did, of course, run 6 or 7 NASCAR Xfinity Series starts. She's only had one almost start driving a 15 car for JD Motorsports, where she did finish in 28th or 29th position. And then, of course, she did run the race at Daytona in ARCA, the number 23 for Sigma Performance Services, where she unfortunately got caught up in a crash 3 laps in the event because Cody Dennison lost control of his car coming down the front straightaway. Now, there's been a lot of people that are saying, how is Katherine Legge approved, but Mike Wallace not approved? And I want to say, kind of drop that narrative really quickly. Katherine Legge is 44 years old. She has been active. Mike Wallace has not been active in a decade. He's going to be 66 in about a week from now. Let's be real and honest here. If Mike Wallace had been active, he would have been approved to run the Daytona 500. Mike Wallace wasn't approved because he hasn't been active. Katherine Legge has been active. Now, Katherine Legge, in my opinion, is one of the most respected race car drivers, and a lot of people in the industry respect her because what she's been able to accomplish as a racer over the course of the last decade or so. And she's had a lot of success across motorsports. She's been around for a very, very long time, has had a lot of success in the forms of racing that she's competed in, and has taken equipment from time to time and run up front and been super, super competitive. And while I don't think that she is going to be a major factor to win, because let's be real and honest, Live Fast Motorsports, they are not the fastest organization on the world. We talked about the organization as a whole. They're usually a team that competes in super speedways, and while BJ McLeod is doing everything he can to get the best out of these cars and get the best out of equipment, when you're driving for a team that is not consistently up front on a week-by-week basis and definitely can struggle and not run up front very consistently, you're generally not going to have a fantastic runs as a whole. So what are realistic expectations for Katherine Legge going into this weekend? Realistically, just gain that experience. So if you do down the road get the chance and opportunity to make more starts in the NASCAR Cup Series with a team like Live Fast Motorsports, you will get that chance down the road, especially if you want to down the road run the Daytona 500. There is a potential possibility for that as well. I think realistically she's going to finish around that 35th to 36th range because while I think Katherine Legge is a good driver and can get the best out of equipment, historically Live Fast Motorsports has not been that good at a track like Phoenix Raceway, and I think it is going to be a little bit of a struggle for her to keep up with the speed and pace because all the charter teams have shown a lot of improvement. Well, Live Fast Motorsports, while yes, they can be very competitive at super speedway-like tracks, I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a struggle for her, but getting that experience in NASCAR, of course, we'll be monitoring her as she will also compete in that 45-minute practice session that's going to take place on Saturday morning at the track. So she is going to have that experience from running that practice session as well. Again, though, this is a really great opportunity for Katherine Legge, and I think she will have a very good chance and opportunity here to see what she can do. I do think there's a chance she also, like I've already mentioned and said, could make more starts in NASCAR if this is a successful weekend. She, of course, is going to run most likely the Indy 500, like I already mentioned, with Ray Hall, Letterman, not Ray Hall, but probably Dale Coyne Racing in a third car. We're waiting on that to be officially confirmed at this point, but is expected to be confirmed. But she is someone who's had a lot of success in racing, and I really hope that she can do a really good job against drivers like Bubba Wallace in the series, Shane Van Gisbergen, other people like Kyle Busch, who was really good at COTA, Tyler Reddick, Christopher Bell, be up there and compete against guys like Kyle Larson and Chase Elliott and Ryan Blaney, and of course other people in the field like Chris Buescher, Ryan Preece, Brad Keselowski, other people in the field like Riley Herbst, other people like Eric Jones and John Hunter Nemechek, and other people in the future like Jimmy Johnson if he wants to make starts. At the end of the day, this is a really great and fantastic opportunity for Katherine, and again, I really hope she can make the best out of this deal, and hope she can run very solid and good run. Good luck to her as she looks to run very strong and really great with the organization this weekend with Live Fast Motorsports at Phoenix Raceway. Hope she can run great. I think she'll finish probably around 35th, though, this weekend at Phoenix Raceway. So, that is going to be for today's NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. What are your expectations for Katherine Legge this weekend at Phoenix? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Kyle Larson running with Spire Motorsports and truck competition? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. We're going to have the decision on the appeal coming for Chase Briscoe later today. We've also got the Xfinity Series race picks coming out for Phoenix Raceway as well. Tomorrow we're going to have the Cup race picks for Phoenix for the Shriners Children's 500. And then, of course, we are going to have the paint skin video dropping as well. Friday, we should have a NASCAR news video discussing news over the course of the last couple of days. And then we're going to have race reviews for all the series this weekend at Phoenix. And then have a NASCAR news video on Monday. Got content coming out of people like Haley Dean, Carl Edwards, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Shane Van Gisbergen, Connor Zilisch, Junior Motorsports, Red Bull, Sam Mayer, Sheldon Creed, and other drivers in the field like Cleese Farland, Matt DiBenedetto, and Chase Elliott as well. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, buddy.